Welcome to this explainer. Look, today we're pausing the usual marketing hype to establish a strict operating checkpoint. We're going to unpack exactly why a credible negative price guarantee has to be a rigorous engineered system, not just some catchy slogan you slap onto a website. This all really boils down to one critical question. Could your offer safely carry a real consequence?
Because here's the truth. Most people can copy a guarantee headline. Anyone with a keyboard can write, "If we fail, we pay," just to attract some quick attention. It sounds bold, it sounds aggressive, and it definitely turns heads in a crowded market. But as you're about to see, getting attention is entirely different from having actual operational credibility.
And that leads us to a pretty harsh reality. Very few can build the system that makes the headlines safe. A serious guarantee demands an engineered operating system, one that answers all those critical questions about deliverables, proof, and risk long before a single dollar is ever spent on advertising.
It's incredibly dangerous to move too fast here. On one side, you have a copied headline resting on a completely unstable foundation. On the other, a true operating system anchored in stability. Listen to this closely. A guarantee without an operating system is not bold. It is an unfunded liability. We aren't here for a motivational speech about being accountable. We are here to build a practical operating map.
So let's dive into a quick audit. The fastest way to tell whether a guarantee is real or fake is by looking for visible answers to a few specific points. Is the promise clear enough to judge? Does the buyer have a fair, simple path to make a claim? And most importantly, you have to ask a very direct question. What does the seller actually lose when they fail?
That brings up the crucial point of understanding who is actually carrying the risk. A normal refund can still be useful, sure, but a refund alone often protects the seller way more than the buyer. The buyer has to complain, chase down support, and prove everything. If the seller risks absolutely nothing, the guarantee is probably just decoration. A hard guarantee, and the trust it creates, must be visible before the buyer ever needs it. Trust shouldn't begin after a complaint. It has to begin before payment. But just being visible is not enough. A genuine standard also means proportionate, fair rules that prevent abuse without trapping the customer in red tape. A credible system has to clearly define the promised outcome, the time frame, exactly what proof is needed, and precisely what the seller pays when failure is verified. These rules are there to protect the entire system.
Now, anti-abuse does not mean legal fog. Complex, hidden clauses are a massive warning sign that the seller just wants the marketing benefit of a guarantee without taking on the actual operational responsibility. An honest buyer should literally never need a lawyer to understand whether a promise applies to them. Eligibility should protect the system, yes, but it should never punish the honest buyer.
Once those rules are fair, the next question is whether the business is truly ready to carry the risk. This means building capability gradually, layer by layer, rather than just leaping blindly to a negative price overnight. A cautious business makes delivery more consistent first, removes friction, introduces a fair refund policy, and only then tests a controlled seller-side consequence.
As the rule goes, do not begin with the penalty. Begin with the promise you can reliably keep. Making a broad promise, like saying you will entirely transform someone's life or business, is really dangerous because it's incredibly hard to prove. A business must first narrow its focus to visible deliverables, a firm deadline, and a remarkably clear failure condition. This layered approach builds a foundation of truth. You see, a vague promise simply asks for blind trust. It just says, "Believe us." But an engineered promise creates measurable proof that actively invites fair judgment. It functions almost like a mini contract where everyone knows exactly what success and failure actually look like. And once the business invites that judgment, a valid claim is not automatically proof that the guarantee was a mistake. Instead, every single valid claim becomes a critical signal pointing to a mismatch in one of three areas: what was promised, how it was delivered, or who was allowed to buy in the first place. Embracing this requires a complete shift in mindset. Claims are not just costs. They are data about your offer. A valid claim is incredibly expensive feedback. That means the right response is never to make the guarantee harder to use or to get defensive. The right response is to repair the system that created the failure. But repairing the system requires the seller to actually survive the financial consequence of those claims. Which brings us to a harsh reality. Profit is not cash. An invoice you sent out is not cash received. A sale made this month might not help pay a consequence that is due today.
Profit on paper simply cannot reimburse a customer today.
To avoid collapsing the business, serious planning separates your money into buckets: real cash that is already available, expected cash that hasn't arrived yet, and committed cash that must leave the business. A serious pilot requires dedicated reserves and a defined risk cap, so you do not fund a serious guarantee with hope. The goal is to absorb valid claims safely.
But money is only one balance sheet. Every credible promise also exacts a human cost that has to be managed with equal discipline. You manage a financial balance sheet by looking at risk exposure and unit economics, right? Well, you also have to manage a human balance sheet by looking closely at workload, role clarity, and the capacity to fix problems before they repeat.
Remember this: profit is not cash. A team is not an unlimited buffer. Your team is not a shock absorber for an offer you never engineered. A company simply cannot promise more accountability in its marketing while forcing its people to absorb every operational flaw behind the scenes. When a team is overloaded, errors rise, promises become vague, and claims become highly likely. So instead of telling an overloaded team to simply work harder, a sustainable system does the exact opposite. It actively removes preventable workload. It clarifies ownership and fixes bottlenecks before adding more demand. Sustainable delivery is not kindness. It is risk management.
And when financial and human capacity are both fiercely protected, the offer can finally improve on purpose. An offer improves when failure creates a genuine reason to improve it. It transforms from a static, decaying promise into a rigorous operating commitment, where preventable failure becomes impossible to ignore. Consequences without measurable proof aren't brave, they are reckless. This precise operating standard is demonstrated by NegBook, the first book in the world with a negative price. Built on the title, "Well-being is impossible if you don't measure it," it establishes a very specific premise. Either you read the book and it helps you, or you read the book and it pays you. The point isn't just the refund amount, it's the operating standard behind it, which you can check out at www.negbook.com. Because ultimately, value should be clear enough to be judged. A catchy headline can be copied in an afternoon. A delivery system cannot. Competitors can imitate your words, but they cannot easily imitate your clarity, your cash discipline, and your team capacity. This establishes a deep operational category advantage that competitors simply cannot fake. So before you rush out to copy a negative price guarantee, you really must honestly audit your own foundations. Look in the mirror and answer this defining question: could your business actually survive the promise it wants to advertise? This is exactly why the -1 Diagnostic exists. It helps businesses assess their offer clarity, delivery readiness, and controlled seller-side consequences before launching any pilot. Apply for the -1 Diagnostic. The link is in the description at negbook.com/negative price standard. I leave you with the central rule of this entire operating standard. Do not copy the headline. Build the system that makes the headline safe.